We are back again today, and we are here with a special edition from our webinar series. And we're going to be breaking down the history of Christmas. Because, as a lot of people know, we look at Christmas from a holiday perspective, gifts, celebrating, and looking at concepts of Santa Claus being the white man with the beard, fat, giving away all the Christmas toys around the country. But, family, there's a real deep rooted history in our lineage that connects us directly towards what we really truly need to understand as it relates to what Christmas is really all about. And as we know, Jesus Christ is the representation on that day. But we do know when we look at our Kemetic history, we know that the true representation of Jesus Christ is Haru. So, family, today we're going to get it broken down, everything that entails everything about the holiday season that we call Christmas. So, family, sit back, get ready to be educated on some history. Brother Kaba, how's everything going?
My brother Harun has said everything is excellent, man. Been looking forward to this. As we spoke before, we were developing this particular presentation, this webinar. Never got a chance to do it until now, but becomes so important for us to understand what this season is. And again, it's astronomical, and it's important that we understand that a lot of it is just sheer astronomy that our ancestors developed, and it was based around the equinoxes and the solstices in order to keep the proper type of calendar, particularly the 26,000 year calendar, the leap year calendar, which I know that we have a leap year every 4 years. But it's really more like a leap day because you just add a day. But what our ancestors did is that they calculated into their calendar every 1,460 years. They put an entire year next to that. So their calendar was 1,461 years. And that included the 360.25 days of the of the calendar year. And they also had an agricultural calendar, which is the calendar that we deal with right now, which is basically January to December, which is off, even when you look at the way in which it's set up. There were 3 weeks with 10 days each, and every month with 30 days. We'll talk about it as we go on. But for those of you who are in the northern hemisphere, which means you're north of the equator, what I'd like you to do on a clear night is when you go out, I want you to look south and then look east, and you'll see 3 stars. And if you go down to the left of those 3 stars, you'll see a very bright star. And that is what our Kush Kemetic ancestors called Sopet, or what we today call Sirius. It's a very bright star. It's Sirius A. And so the astronomical importance of understanding the development of the calendar and looking at this birth, the 30 days times 12 is 360. And then they add what was called an epigomenal month, or the little month, which was 5 days. And it was in those 5 days that they celebrated the life and the times of the Asarian drama, which eventually becomes the birth of Heru, or the new sun. And so when you look up into the heavens and you understand what you're dealing with, you understand that what happened, which would be for us yesterday, this is Sunday, so this would be Saturday, December 21st, which was the winter solstice. Solstice means to stand still. The equinox, which we celebrated in Kush in June, that represents the equinox, which means that the days and nights are equal. And so what happens is that the daylight during the winter solstice begins to get shorter as it approaches December. You have the autumnal equinox where there's 12 hours of light, 12 hours of dark. And then every day after that, it gets darker earlier until you get to the winter solstice. And the winter solstice is when the sun stands still. And then the sun begins to move away, which means that your days are going to start to get longer now. But the thing is that between December 21st and December 25th, there was a lull because of the sun was at its shortest time. so that when you get to the last 5 days of the year, you have the birth of the Heru, or the resurrected sun. And what's interesting is that the idea is the fact that the sun is born in the Virgo cluster, or I should say the Virgo constellation, which means that the sun is born of the Virgin. Okay, that's where it comes from. And then you have the concept of the idea that they move in as it relates to the stars and to the sun that's being born again for the first time. It's moving into the constellation known as the manger. So that's why Christ was born in the manger. It's all constellation. It's all astronomical. It deals with the stars. It's a beautiful story. And when you understand the story from a certain perspective, then you can begin to understand the spiritual aspect of the story of the birth of the Jesus, or the birth of the Heru. As you know, as you get to December 31st, you have the idea of the old man going out when the new little infant is being born. Well, that was Heru coming out from Asar. It's just a very straightforward astronomical story, but they don't teach this to us anymore. So what becomes important is that we just wish you all a very happy Xmas. This webinar, which is a special edition, is the history of Christ's Mass, meaning that it was the sun, Mes. Kores means Kores is the rising of the spirit. Ka means spirit. Res means to rise. Mes means the son of. So basically, it was the idea of the son of the sun being born through the light, heat, and sound energy that rises and creates the world that we're living in. So, family, here we go. Let's just look at this. And of course, I just want to show you this. You see that Heru, the falcon, got his little cap on his head, and he's celebrating. You can see he got a do-rag on too, but he's celebrating his rise and his coming into existence. And so as we go into happy Xmas, the first thing that I want you to do is to understand the 5 days of the epigomenal year, that little month, in terms of the entire 360 and then plus 5. And then every 140 years, they added a year. This has to do with astronomy and sets everything in place as it relates to astronomy. The story of Christmas and New Year originally came from the Kush Kemet, or Egyptian story, in the Assyrian drama. You're dealing with 5 characters in this story. You're dealing with Aset, who is the mother, Asar, who is the father, Heru, who is the son of Aset and Asar. Satan is the uncle, or the opposite of Asar. It doesn't mean that he's bad. It just means that he's the opposite. So just like you have the Asarian fruitful giving birth, Satan never really gave birth according to stories, although they have other stories too, but we'll leave that for when it applies, because with our ancestors, we told many different stories, but the interesting thing is that they applied to the certain story that was being told then. It's like when we say situations alter cases. Nebetet was the aunt. I'm trying to break it down in our own understanding so we can see this. She is the oracle reader. These are all brothers and sisters except for Heru, who is the son of Aset and Asar. Aset, Asar, Seten, Nebetet, they're all brother and sister in the story, to get the idea of the story in place. But Nebetet is the oracle reader. She is what's called the Sibyl, Sibyl. She is the oracle reader that creates and interprets the world around us that we cannot necessarily see, but she can. The Kush Kemet Great Year, we're talking about Egypt. The Great Year was the precession of the equinox, which equals 26,000 years. The precession had 12 houses, just like we have astronomy with the 12 houses. But in this case, instead of being a month each house was 2,160 years in length. And 12 times 2,160 equals 25,920, with 80 years being a buffer zone for any corrections that may have to be made. It's just the way in which our ancestors always built into everything the ability to alter certain situations as they arose. And so they never had a problem timing things out. And so as you look at this great Kush Komet year, what you understand is that the precession of the equinox, a precession is a change in the orientation of the rotational axis. It can be defined as a change in the first angle, which defines the rotation itself. When the axis of the angle of one axis rotates around the second axis, that first angle is said to be precessing around the second angle. I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about as we move through this process. But the precession of the equinoxes of 26,000 years, every house that came into existence precessed the one that it was surpassing. Now, to understand the concept that we're dealing with as it relates to astronomy, when we look into the far future, which would be 2070 to 2100, this information I get from a book, Physics of the Future, by a brother by the name of Michio Kaku. He calls it the age of magnetism, which is the feminine energy. Electricity is a male energy. Magnetism is a female energy. And we are now moving into what we call the age of Hapi, or the age of Aquarius, the water bearer. The initial house of the precession of the equinoxes, it was one of the first houses. The Pisces, the Piscean age was the age of the fishes, which would foretell the water that was coming as it relates to the next age of 2160 or 2160 years. Physicists will find their solution in the room temperature superconductors. This will usher in an entirely new era, the age of magnetism. It's already happening, by the way, family. Imagine riding in a magnetic car. See, all the different things that we have, like when you're driving and all of a sudden there's a car that's very close to you in the lane and that light goes off or sound goes off. They are now having cars that can drive themselves. They have cars that can park themselves. Well, this is all based on the superconductor or the magnetism that is now coming into existence. Trains will operate on magnetism. Airplanes will also operate on magnetism. You know, it'll be like on the train when you see the train is on a train track and it runs along and it receives its energy from the third rail. Well, this is what's going to happen with cars. It's going to be what happens with airplanes. You'll be able to, one day there'll be no, you won't have to drive a car. The car will take you where you want to go, just magnetic. You just push it in with your, with your car map that you just put the address you're going to in, and you sit back and the car will drive itself. The same is going to happen with airplanes. One day there'll be airplanes that will not have a pilot in time. Okay, we're looking beyond the far future, but this is where we're heading. So imagine riding in a magnetic car, hovering above the ground and traveling at several hundred miles per hour using almost no fuel. Solar power, but that's a side point. Imagine trains and evil people traveling in the air, floating on magnetism. We already see people who have those machines where they can just drive themselves. They can fly up in the air and go wherever they want to go. That will be perfected. It's happening as we speak. What I'd like to do is just show you the precession of the equinox because of the 23rd and the third tilt of the Earth. What you're looking at here is the great year of 26,000 years, or you can even look at it as 25,920 years. The Earth, because it's tilted, is aiming towards, as you can see up here, the North Star, Polaris. This is why the North Star played such an important role even on the Underground Railroad. And what's going to happen is that you see the precession. It's going to move around in this way. It's going to wobble around this way, and it's going to go into the great year. Now, what you can see here in the front, you have Pisces. Okay, Pisces now is moving into Aquarius, which is the age that we're moving into right now, which is going to be the age of magnetism. This is just science. This is not personal. This is not superior, but you see, the current Western civilization hasn't been around for 25,920 years to know this. So that's why I'm studying our ancestors' work, because they've been around for millions of years and they've perfected this. And it's important that we understand how things are going. So when you see global warming, don't be surprised. That's all part of this being on the cusp of going from the age of Pisces, which lasted 2,160. This is what the birth of Christ was meant to represent. The birth of Christ was the incoming house of Pisces. That's why he was a fisher of men. Okay, now Pisces is moving out, and now we're moving into the age of Aquarius, and it's a feminine age. The house of Hapi or Aquarius. In astronomy, precession refers to any of the several slow changes in an astronomical body's rotation or orbital journey. An important example is the steady change in the orientation of the axis of the Earth, known as the precession of the equinox. And once again, Earth rotates once a day around its rotational axis in terms of going around the sun. This axis rotates slowly, completing a rotation in approximately 25,920 years. It completes the total movement around the universe. There are 12 houses by 2,160 Earth years, which becomes 25,920 Earth years, or 80 Earth years for flexibility that's added on to become 26,000. And the Earth is entering the house of Hapi, or what we call the age of Aquarius. And this basically is what it looks like. Just like a top that's spinning. This is exactly what this looks like. Okay. It just moves around like a top. And it moves in perfect rotation. So let's look at it there. The precession of the equinox is the same way. I'm going to take you back to the preceding slide. You see it there. You see how it's moving. Okay. It's spinning like a top. Well, that's what happens here. And it's focused up here on Polaris, or the North Star. And that's the circle that it goes in every 26,000 years, or 25,920 years to be exact. And it goes in this type of rotational circle. It's just science, but folk around haven't been around that long, so they don't know what they're talking about. And so here again is another way of looking at the precession. Here is the Earth, the line of sight to Polaris, and then Polaris turns and goes in that circle. You have Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, and you have concepts that will take you to understanding how it's moving around. It moves in a circle. Looking from the outside, this is the precession of the equinox. Again, remember the top that was spinning? This is how it looks. It's aimed at Polaris, and it moves in a circle. And this circle up here, as it wherever it may be, will be that precession of the equinox. Let me show it to you another way. Here's where I take the same concept, and this is what we're doing. This is the way in which we're moving. The great year. Just look at the comparison and the importance of the North Star and what it's set on. And the pyramids of Kemet, Kush Kemet, Egypt, are all focused on the North Star. North Star is a very important star. This is why Harriet Tubman was an astronomer, because she knew exactly how to move and when to move and how to move on the Earth. And she also studied geology that her daddy taught her in terms of studying the moss on rocks to see how it would tell you what time of the year that you were dealing with. This is what we're celebrating on December 25th, family. Okay. And again, 1 year equals 12 months plus a 5-day epigomenal month. Each month was 3 weeks of 10 days, or 30 days. 12 times 30 is 360 days. And then 1 times 5 is 5 days. And so the Kush Kemet year was 365 days. 13 months. Leap year occurred every 1,460 years. 1,460 divided by 5. My bad. I'm going to say it again. 1,460 divided by 4. That's why we celebrate it every 4 years, is equal to 365. So 4 sets of 1,460 years, 4 of those sets times that, all you got to do is multiply it, and it becomes 365. Now, when you add 1 year to that 1,460 years, then you get 1,460 years plus 1 year equals 1,461 years. It's a phenomenal story, family. And it's a shame that people get things so twisted because they don't know and they think that they know. And so what they do is they take science. You know, last week I was with my brother, Professor James Smalls. And Brother Smalls was speaking on what happened with the Indo-European world, studying at the feet of the Kush Kemet, the Africans. And he said that Africans looked at the world through science and spirituality. They saw that spirituality, as I say in my book, Spirituality Before Religions, the subtitle is Spirituality is Unseen Science and Science is Seen Spirituality. Well, what the Indo-Europeans did, because of their lack of depth, because they were so shallow, because in so many different ways I see them as superficial sapiens. They haven't been around that long, but they think they know it all. And because of that, when our ancestors were teaching them the spiritual science, they couldn't get to the spiritual science. They had no conceptual framework of the spirituality. So what they did is that they created what they thought of as science. And they connected it with the mythological explanation of science that became religions. And so everything that they saw through religion became or came from a science which they barely understood also. And so, you know, what we're dealing with here and what we have to understand is that I don't blame them for not knowing because they don't know. But what I say is that we must step up and we must teach ourselves the science of what we're experiencing. And I'm not even talking about Santa Claus. I'm talking about the religious aspect of Christmas Day, which was said to be a Christ child born to a virgin mother in the manger, which is astronomical. The Son of God born in the constellation of Virgo, with the sun rising in the constellation of the manger. Now, let's look at the epigomenal days, the 5 days. The intercalary month, 5 days, epigomenal days. The intercalary month or epigomenal days of the ancient Kush Kemet, which is Egyptian, Coptic, and Ethiopian calendars, are a period of 5 days in common years, in addition to those calendars' 12 standard months, sometimes reckoned as their 13th month. The intercalary month, or the 5 epigomenal days, is considered a 13th month. They originated as a periodic measure to ensure that the heliacal rising of Sirius, remember we talked about Sirius, would occur in the 12th month of the Egyptian lunar calendar, but became a regular feature of the civil calendar and its descendants. There's many calendars that Black folk have. The epigomenal month, the 13th month, was also called the little month. It was the astronomical celebration that we today call Christmas. The period was known as the birthdays of the gods, as early as the Old Kingdom, from 4245 to 2064 BCE. And it was written in the pyramid texts, which is in Unas's pyramid temple complex. And remember, Haruna said we visited that temple when we were in Kush Kemet, or Egypt, this past June. By the early Middle Kingdoms, from 2065 to 1784, years before the Common Era, the days were specified and ordered. They were put in place. And this is what they look like. The period was known as the birthdays of the gods as early as the pyramid text. By the early Middle Kingdom, the days were specified and ordered. For instance, this is how it looked in Medu Neter or in hieroglyphics. This is how the first day looked. The 5 upon the year. You know it's 5 because of this 3 and 2. This is the odd. 3 odd numbers were male and even numbers were female. So you know that the 3 is male and the 2 is female. And this is how they described it in Medu Neter or hieroglyphs. Renpet, RNPT. Heru Renpet. Okay. The 5 upon the year. The first one, the first day was the birth of Asar or Osiris. It was also originally known as the pure bull in his field, fertile, sterile. Well, let me just put it like he was very fertile, like the bull would look to be fertile. Although that aspect of the intercalary festivities was moved later to the second day as Horus grew in importance. So you take a look at that. And by the way, family, you'll get a PDF copy of this so that you can study it to the next level. The second day was the birth of Aset or Isis, and it was of great importance of Isis and her long-standing connection with the star Sirius, which is this star here. Sopet is what they called it. Sirius is what we call it, and it's in the Canis Major, in the great dog constellation. And again, this is how they represented her. The throne, of course, is Aset. Okay. And then you have the birth of Isis. This is how it is when it's transliterated. And this is Medu Neter. On the third day, you have the birth of Set, the brother. Here is the symbol of Set here. Almost like a dog-like, beast-like. Okay, not bad. Because this is what's important, because I know we have a word called Satan, which is where this word comes from. But the idea is that, he wasn't bad. The third day was the birth of Satan or Set. Not bad, but the opposite of Asar. So when you have the richness of Asar, water, fruits, vegetables, everything wonderful, you have Set, who is the desert, who is dryness. You have Asar, who is a developer, a creator, a constructor. And you have Satan, who is a destroyer. But in order to build and to construct, sometimes you must destroy. That's why I'm saying that Set was not bad. They didn't view things in that way. Everything had its place. So the third day was the birth of Set. This is the 5 days of the end of the year. Then you have the birth of Nephthys or Nebetet, who is the oracle reader. And you know that this is Nebetet because of this Medu Neter symbol right here. And then again, you have the star that's bringing light, heat, and sound energy down to the earth. Then you have the birth of Horus. The fifth day was the birth of Heru or Horus. It was originally the most important heralding in New Year's festival and celebrating a child in his nest, coming forward as a falcon, as an eagle, as a bird, coming up out of the nest to be born again, as it relates to an understanding of the rebirth of all of us. And this was meant to be the rebirth of the agricultural year, which was 365 days. And this is what Christ's Mass was. It's just very interesting how what was once astronomical has become biological as it relates to human. And here you have the cosmic father with the black cosmic mother, leaving the age of Pisces, entering the age of Hapi. This is where we are. This is the birth. Leaving the age of Pisces, entering the age of Hapi. And then finally, the age of Hapi, Aquarius, with the child coming forward with the fluid of the cosmic universe. Prepare for the return of your black cosmic mother. This is Aset, Isis, however you want to call her. This is Nebetet, the feminine energy, the age of magnetism. This is where we are. And although as gender, and I'm not speaking gender-wise as it relates to male and female, I'm talking about energy, because all of us are both male energy and female energy. And we as men will find that our energy is going to be promoted and inspired by the female in us, or our mother's X chromosome. Within the woman, it will also be inspired by their mother's X chromosome. And with women, they'll be inspired by the X chromosome that came from their daddy. And we as men will be inspired to do our part through our Y chromosome that we inherited from our daddy. So we put this out now so that you will know the beauty of what you're celebrating, and to understand that the ancient culture and civilization saw this time of year through astronomy, through science, through wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. There was no human beings that we worshipped. It was the creator-given universe that allowed all things to happen and allowed us to be able to remain on our earth in peace, in tranquility, peace on earth, goodwill to men and women. Peace, family. Happy Xmas.
Yes, yes, definitely, and that definitely puts it in a perspective that everybody can understand that the history of Christmas, even though we look at it from the celebration aspect, that there's a historical perspective, and even just leading into the final question, the wrap up question for this special edition of our webinar series. When we look at places like Europe, and we look at their celebrations of Christmas, and we see how they have the Santa Claus, and we see how they have the white people that dress up with the blackface. Can you explain a little bit more that celebration and how that differs from what we see here in America?
Well, what's interesting is that when the Moors went into Europe, they brought this astronomical story with them, and they brought the celebration of this astronomy with them. And what was interesting is that the elves are actually the Twa Imbuti people. They are the short-statured people. In Ireland, the Twa Imbuti were the leprechauns. And so what would happen is that they would have celebrations, and African men would go around and give out gifts and candy to the children. And they were working with the other Africans who were the Twa Imbuti Khoisan people of Central and Southern Africa. This is the image that they created. It was a celebration of the children. Remember, the celebration of the children were to keep the children happy because they were the sons of the Creator. Now, when I say sons, I'm talking about S-U-N, which includes young boys and young girls. And so the idea is that Santa Claus represented, that entity that brought gifts to the children, celebrating the birth of children, celebrating them as children being birthed from us. And they used the metaphor of astronomy to do it, but they humanized it, because this is the time when everybody's so happy to get gifts. And, my children know, my children never believed in Santa Claus. They believed in gifts. They believed in family gatherings. Every Christmas day, I would bring the children to the movies. We would go to the movies every Christmas and every Easter, and I would tell the story somewhat like I just told you, but more like a child's story to help them understand exactly what we were celebrating. Because psychologically speaking, and I know I was in the first grade when I stopped believing in Santa Claus. And I know how I felt when I found out there was no Santa Claus. Now I'm living in the project. There wasn't no chimneys in the project. So how could I have thought? That's how deep the psychology was. That despite the fact that Santa Claus come down chimney, I was trying to figure out how he got through. And I also want to know how he got past Joe Jackson with all them gifts. Because I know for a fact Joe Jackson would have been waiting for Santa Claus that night to grab him some gifts. So that, but even in a child's mind, you don't think that you can be brought to a certain level. And as you grow and you continue to believe this story, then you believe the story. And my thing is that I worked all year long, hard to get the gifts for my children, for my wife, but particularly as it relates to the children, I was not going to give credit to anyone outside myself. I'm not even talking about if we thought Santa Claus was black. I worked too hard to get them gifts for my children. But the concept is to give gifts to the children. This is a children's celebration, just like the resurrection of the father and mother comes through the parents, and the child is born for the new year. And that is what was celebrated for the children. The holiday really is a child's celebration. When you get into the astronomy of it, you can understand it. But the idea is that it is a child's celebration. It is the child coming in. And that is what Africans did by bringing the celebration. You know, it was Charlotte Sophia that introduced the Christmas tree into Europe. Because they had the Christmas tree in Portugal, where she was a Portuguese Moor. Africans brought the Christmas tree because remember the story of the Asarian drama is that the first time around, Asar was hidden in a tree. And then the idea of the star on top of the tree comes from Aset finding with Nebatet and the wisdom of Tehuti, Ma'at's husband, where Asar's body was. And that's how they rescued him. So that it's an astronomical story. It's a celebration of children. And that is why you celebrate the Christ child. And you celebrate the 3 stars of the Magi. January 6th was more of a celebration for the Christian church back in the day than Christmas Day was, because it was the rising of Sirius coming out of the heavens and the 3 stars of Orion's belt pointing directly to it. And again, like I say, for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, when you go outside, just look south and then look east and you'll see the 3 stars. And then if you look to the left, you'll see the brightest star in the heavens, which is Sirius or Soped, which rises up and is seen for the first time. And in a sense, it is born in the constellation Manger.
Yes, definitely. And then it all even just intertwines with just the winter solstice and then how we were talking about just Comet and just correlating that, and even just going back to being here in America and showing the correlation between Comet and America and just everything. Now we're just understanding, as we look at how Christmas is, so big in America, and then we look at Comet and then we just look at all of the history and putting all the things together. It just definitely puts in a much more clearer perspective that history has everything to do. All these holidays, when we look at Veterans Day, that's, we started that. Like all the holidays, even the holidays that are marketed that are white, and obviously the ones that are black, like MLK. And now when we look at Juneteenth, like everything that is celebrated, everything that is represented in, the United States and even outside of the United States deals with the history of black people. One way or another, everything deals with black people because we are the foundation of it. And
And,
that's
and
just,
that's science, man. That's not personal. That's not superior or inferior. When you look at all of the pyramids, or what people call mounds here in America, they're all based off the same astronomical story as the ones in Africa, be they in Kush Kemet, whether it's in Sudan or in Kemet. They're all based. Cahokia is based on the same concept. They're all based on astronomy and how the shadow of the sun is cast on the mound or the pyramid tells you what time of the year and sometimes even what time of the day you are experiencing. Science.
Yep, yep. Definitely. And it just shows our continued greatness. And it just shows that the mission that our ancestors set up for us, that we must continue for the future generations. So what a wonderful way to cap off this wonderful, special edition where we're breaking down our history. Even though we look at it as a commercialized holiday, this is still our history. Everything comes from us. When we look at the Bible, obviously, Christmas is about Jesus and that representation. And then when we look at the Osirian drama and we look at Haru, that is the representation of Jesus Christ. So our history is everywhere. Whether they want to admit it or not, we're here to show you what it is so you can go and spread that wealth of knowledge amongst your communities. So family, enjoy the holidays, stay safe, stay black. Black power, family. Hotep.